Keisha Morgan woke before sunrise on the morning of her big day, her heart pulsing with a mix of hope and nerves. In the dim light of her small apartment, she laid out the navy blue suit she had chosen weeks ago. It was her favorite outfit, simple, neat, and professional. She smoothed the fabric over the back of her chair and pressed her palms together, taking a deep breath. Today she would interview at Starlight Technologies. It's a fast-growing software company she had dreamed about since she first read about its clever apps in a tech magazine. She remembered how she had fallen in love with computers when she was in middle school. In her small town, most kids spent afternoons playing by the creek or helping with chores on the family farm. But Keisha spent her free time teaching herself to write code. She used her old family laptop to practice basic programs, then moved on to more challenging projects in high school. She built a simple budgeting tool for her neighbors, and they paid her a few dollars to help them track their expenses. Small success filled her with pride. It was the first time she saw how her skills could help real people in her own community. When she went to college, she chose a school 2 towns away. It was the first time she lived in a place where no one knew her name. She liked the freedom. She stayed up late studying algorithms with friends, ordered pizza during hackathons, and learned how to work on large group projects without letting her voice go unheard. At the end of her senior year, she graduated with honors and a solid portfolio of apps, tools, and research papers. She felt ready to change the world. But finding the right job was harder than she had expected. After graduation, she sent her resume to dozens of companies. Every morning, she checked her inbox and social feeds for responses. She got a few thanks but no thanks emails, and some generic messages saying they were seeking candidates with more experience. Each rejection stung, but she pressed on. She reminded herself of why she studied so hard, why she stayed up late, and why she had chosen this path. She was determined to prove that her skills mattered, even if she was new to the field. One afternoon, she saw the email she had been waiting for. The subject line read, "Interview invitation from Starlight Technologies." She read it 3 times before she believed it. Starlight was a rising star in the tech world. Their video calling platform had grown from a simple app to one of the top 20 most downloaded apps in the country. Investors were excited, and the company was hiring top talent in every department. Keisha felt her pulse quicken. She saved the email, printed the interview schedule, and called her best friend Aria to share the news. They celebrated with coffee and pastries at their favorite cafe. Aria hugged her tightly and said, "You deserve this, Keisha. They will see how amazing you are." Keisha smiled, but inside she felt a flicker of doubt. Would they see past her lack of corporate experience and recognize her passion, her skills, and her determination? She tried to focus on her strengths. She had built apps that helped small businesses, won hackathon prizes, and taught herself advanced coding techniques. She rehearsed answers to common interview questions. She practiced walking into the room, making eye contact, and speaking with confidence. The night before the interview, she lay awake imagining the office. She pictured the modern glass building, the sleek desks, and the friendly teams working together. She pictured herself explaining her code, showing her projects on her tablet, and answering questions about server load balancing. She felt excited and ready. At last, exhaustion overtook her and she drifted into a light sleep. On the morning of her interview, the sun was shining through her window. She dressed carefully, applied a bit of light makeup, and tied her hair back in a neat ponytail. She left her apartment and walked to the bus stop, her resume in a folder of her portfolio in a slim leather case. As the bus rumbled through the streets, she rehearsed her introduction. "Hello, I'm Keisha Morgan. Thank you for inviting me here today." When she arrived at Starlight Technologies, her breath caught at the sight of the tall glass doors and the polished lobby. A receptionist smiled and asked her to sign in. She sat in a waiting area filled with other candidates. Some wore sharp suits, others held portfolios like she did. She found an empty spot and took out her notebook. She jotted down 5 questions she wanted to ask about team structure, code review process, project timelines, company values, and professional growth opportunities. She wanted to show that she cared about more than just a paycheck. A few minutes later, the hiring manager, Ms. Patel, came to greet her. She was warm and professional, with a friendly smile. She led Keisha into a conference room with a long table and a huge screen on the wall. Inside, 2 other members of the team waited, an engineer named Carlos and a product manager named Jenna. Keisha shook hands with each of them, introduced herself, and took a seat. Her heart pounded, but she felt calm when she spoke. She answered questions clearly and gave specific examples. She described how her budgeting app helped neighbors save money. She explained how she used Test-driven development in her college projects. She even spoke about a small open-source contribution she made on a weekend. Carlos nodded and asked a detailed question about database scaling. Keisha leaned forward and described her approach, drawing a quick diagram on a notepad. Jenna was impressed when Keisha explained how she had used catching layers to speed up an image processing pipeline. Ms. Patel smiled at her notes and said, "You clearly know your craft. Your technical skills are solid, and you communicate well. That's what we look for at Starlight." Keisha felt a surge of confidence. She asked her 5 questions and thanked them for their honesty. The team discussed their values, the challenges they faced, and the friendly culture they aimed to build. Keisha spoke about her own values: trust, teamwork, and continuous learning. She described how she had stayed up late to help a friend debug a code base, and how she enjoyed mentoring new developers. She wanted to show that she was more than just lines of code. She was a team player. After about an hour, Ms. Patel stood and said, "Thank you for coming in, Keisha. We will be in touch soon." Keisha gathered her portfolio and stood. She thanked each of them and walked out with a hopeful smile. As she left, the weight of nerves lifted, replaced by quiet confidence. She stepped outside into the bright day, imagining herself working at Starlight Technologies, collaborating with brilliant minds, solving tough problems, and growing in her career. Later that afternoon, Keisha sat in a small cafe nearby, sipping tea and replaying the interview in her head. She checked her phone every few minutes, hoping for a response. When the email arrived, her heart skipped a beat. She opened it, and her smile faded as her eyes scanned the words. "Thank you for your interest in the senior systems engineer position. Unfortunately, the role has already been filled. We will keep your application on file." Her hands trembled. She closed her eyes for a moment and exhaled slowly. Disappointment and frustration pooled in her chest. Every hopeful thought seemed to vanish. Keisha stayed at the cafe long after she finished her tea. She stared at the empty cup and fought the urge to cry, but she did not cry. Instead, she pulled out her notebook and wrote at the top of a fresh page, "This is not the end." She listed 3 things she would do next: learn everything she could about network performance, build a new proof-of-concept app, and reach out to Starlight again, but this time with a demonstration of her skills. She closed the notebook, picked up her bag, and walked home. The day had started with hope and ended with rejection, but Keisha refused to let it defeat her spirit. She knew that one day her tenacity would open the door she had just seen close. ChatGPT said. Keisha Morgan woke before dawn the next morning, her mind still buzzing from the sting of rejection. She did not let the email's cold words settle into her spirit. Instead, she brewed a cup of strong coffee and sat at her small kitchen table. The early sun filtered through the window, painting her notebook in warm light. On its blank page, she wrote, "Learn more, try again, show them I can help." She knew that her dream at Starlight Technologies was not lost. It just had not begun yet. She spent that morning reviewing everything she could find about Starlight. She revisited the company's blog posts, read every comment on their public forums, and studied social media chatter about their video calling app. She noticed repeated complaints. Users reported that the app froze or crashed when more than 100 people joined a call. Many were paying customers who relied on the service for remote work meetings and family gatherings. Keisha felt a spark of determination. Here was a problem she could solve. Over the next days, Keisha carved out quiet hours in her evening routine for deep research. After her part-time tutoring sessions at the local high school and her daily coding practice, she returned to her computer with fresh resolve. She mapped out a plan. First, she would gather as many crash reports as she could find. Then she would look for a pattern. Finally, she would propose a technical solution that was simple but effective. She scoured online forums and downloaded crash report logs posted by frustrated users. She created a spreadsheet to track the time of each crash, the number of participants at the moment, and any common error messages. At first, the data seemed messy. Different operating systems, different network speeds. Keisha knew that patterns often hide beneath noise. She sorted the reports by participant count and looked for clusters. Her eyes grew heavy, but she refused to stop until she saw a clear trend. By the end of the week, she had identified that crashes spiked whenever a call had more than 120 simultaneous video streams. She realized that the app server was trying to process every video feed equally, without any priority or load balancing. System. The server memory and CPU usage shot up as each new participant joined, and eventually it could not keep up. Users saw the spinning loading icon, then the sudden crash. Keisha jotted down her observations in her notebook, sketching a simple diagram of server nodes receiving video data. She imagined a way to spread the load more evenly. What if the server assigned participants to different clusters, grouping them so that no single server node handled too many streams at once? She had learned about this concept in her computer science classes, but she had never implemented it at scale. Now, in her small apartment, she felt ready to try. She opened her code editor and began a new project folder. She wrote classes to simulate server clusters and video streams. Then she coded a basic algorithm that would assign incoming streams to the least loaded cluster. Each time a new participant joined, the cluster with the lowest current load would handle the data. The algorithm tracked load in real time and rebalanced responsibilities if one cluster grew too busy. Keisha named her prototype load balancer.js and ran simple tests on her laptop. When she forced 200 simulated streams, the prototype distributed them evenly across 4 clusters, and memory usage remained stable. Excited by her progress, she decided to build a small proof-of-concept application. She created a mock video call interface and hooked it up to her load balancing backend. She used open-source tools to simulate video traffic and log the server performance. Each test showed the same result. Her load balancer prevented spikes in CPU usage and stopped the crashes. Keisha's heart beat faster as she watched the console. No errors, no crashes, no complaints. But she knew that prototypes alone did not convince a busy CEO. She needed a clear, concise presentation that showed both the problem and her solution. She opened her presentation software and designed a short slide deck. The first slide described the crash pattern, with a simple chart of crash frequency rising sharply after 120 participants. The next slide showed her load balancing algorithm, using a clear flowchart. The final slide summarized the results: 90% fewer crashes in her tests, and a smoother experience for users. She rehearsed her presentation out loud, timing herself at under 5 minutes. She wrote a short cover email with her deck attached and a clear subject line: Solution for Starlight Crash Issues, Load Balancer Prototype. She explained how she had identified the problem, built a prototype, and tested it successfully. She offered to discuss her work in more detail if they were interested. She signed off with her contact information and a polite note of thanks for their time. For a moment, she hesitated before clicking send. What if they ignored her again? What if they did not see past her status as an external candidate? But then she remembered why she had done this work. It was not just for a job. It was because she cared about technology that worked for people. It was because she believed in solving real problems. So she took a deep breath and pressed send. The next morning, Keisha woke to no reply. She reminded herself that the world did not move as quickly as her hopes. She spent the day on her usual routine: tutoring, coding, practice, and exercise. But she checked her inbox every hour. Late in the afternoon, a new email arrived from an address she did not recognize. The subject read, Re-Solution for Starlight Crash Issues. Her fingers trembled as she clicked it open. Inside was a message from Mark Davidson, the CEO of Starlight Technologies. He wrote, Your analysis caught my attention. We have been struggling with this issue for weeks. Can your prototype run on our test servers? Let's set up a time to Discuss implementation details. Keisha felt tears of joy in her eyes. She quickly replied with her availability and offered to join a video call the next day. She sat back, smiling, and felt her hard work had paid off. That evening, she prepared for the call. She reviewed her code, polished her slides, and practiced answering possible questions. She wanted to be ready for any technical detail they might ask about. At the same time, she felt calm because she had done the work. She had proven herself. She had shown that her skills could solve a critical problem. On the day of the call, she joined from her home office, her prototype running on a cloud server she had set up for live demonstration. Mark and two lead engineers appeared on her screen. She introduced herself, then walked them through the crash pattern, her algorithm, and her test results. They listened with focused attention. When she shared live metrics, showing how her load balancer stabilized traffic even with high participant counts, Mark nodded with visible relief. Yes! One engineer asked how the algorithm would integrate with their existing architecture. Keisha explained step by step. Add a load balancing service between the incoming stream gateway and the server clusters. Update the routing logic and run the service as a microservice with its own scaling rules. She spoke clearly, avoiding jargon and checking that everyone followed along. The engineers exchanged smiles. Mark said, "This is exactly what we need. Can you work with our team to implement this in production?" Keisha's heart leaped. She replied, "I would be honored." After the call, Mark sent a quick follow-up. "Thank you, Keisha. We will start the rollout tomorrow. Welcome to Starlight Innovations." Keisha stared at the screen, hardly believing the words. She had gone from rejection to being invited to solve the company's biggest crisis. She closed her laptop, sat for a moment, and let the victory sink in. That night, she called Arya. She told her friend every detail: the crash pattern, the algorithm, the call, Mark's invitation. Arya laughed and cried at the same time, telling Keisha how proud she was. Keisha felt a warm glow in her chest. She knew that this was only the start of her journey at Starlight, but she also knew that she had taken control of her future by refusing to accept no as an answer. She had turned rejection into opportunity, and in doing so, she had shown the world what she could truly do. Keisha sat at her desk late into the night, the glow of her laptop the only light in her tiny apartment. Outside, the city had quieted down, but inside her mind, ideas raced faster than she could track. She opened her browser and navigated to Starlight Technologies' public support forum. Every few seconds, a new crash report appeared, sometimes from a small startup team that relied on the app for video meetings, sometimes from a grandmother trying to join her grandchildren online. Keisha felt their frustration as if it were her own. She read each report carefully, noting the timestamps, the device types, and the number of participants on the call when the app froze or shut down. She opened a blank spreadsheet and labeled 3 columns: participants, device, and error message. She copied each crash report into the sheet, line by line, methodically filling in the details. At first, the data looked scattered. There were reports from phones, from laptops, even from tablets. Some errors mentioned low memory, others a timeout. But week after week, a few entries caught her eye. They mentioned calls with more than 100 people, mentioned a spike in latency. And almost every time, the crash happened at the same threshold, around 120 participants. Keisha leaned back and rubbed her tired eyes. She thought about her own college projects, where she had learned about load balancing. In theory, a server should distribute incoming work evenly across multiple machines. But here, she suspected, the video streams were piling onto a single node, overwhelming it until it collapsed.
Ow.
She tapped her pencil on the notebook beside her and sketched a rough diagram, a big box labeled server. Dozens of arrows pointing into it from tiny boxes marked user streams. She drew a second diagram, the same arrows splitting evenly among 4 smaller boxes. This, she decided, was her mission. Over the next days, after her afternoon tutoring sessions at the local community college, she returned home and set aside dedicated coding time. She created a new folder on her laptop called Starlight Fix. Inside, she initialized a fresh project using Node.js, her favorite language for quick prototypes. She wrote the first lines of code, a simple class called cluster that tracked the number of streams it handled. She wrote another class called stream to simulate a video connection. Then she started working on the core, a load balancer module. It needed a method named assignStream that looked at all the clusters and picked the one with the lowest current load. Each evening, she tested her code with a simple script that created 100 fake streams and assigned them one by one. The console printed out how many streams each cluster carried. The first time she ran it without any balancing logic, one cluster took on 80% of the 100 streams. All the others shared the remaining 20. That imbalance would surely crash a real server under heavy traffic. She changed her assignStream method. Now it sorted clusters by load and chose the first one. She ran the test again. This time, each cluster reported about 25 streams. Perfect distribution, she smiled, feeling a surge of satisfaction. But she did not stop there. She knew Starlight's real traffic was not uniform. Some users might join mid-call or leave unexpectedly. She needed dynamic rebalancing. She wrote a method called rebalance clusters that periodically checked each cluster's load and moved streams from the busiest to the least busy until the difference was no more than one stream. She ran more tests, simulating random join and leave events. The algorithm kept clusters balanced even as streams came and went. When she saw how smoothly the numbers leveled out, she leaned back and let out a quiet laugh. She had built exactly what she needed. Now she faced her next challenge, proving it would work on Starlight's system. She decided to turn her prototype into a live demo. She spun up a small virtual server on a cloud provider's free tier and deployed a simple Express app that accepted simulated stream connections. She integrated her load balancer module into the server's startup script. She set up a script to fire hundreds of concurrent HTTP requests, each representing a new video stream. She watched her server logs to see how the streams were assigned and balanced across her 3 test clusters. Each time the number of simulated connections rose, the clusters adjusted, and CPU usage stayed well below maximum. No crashes. No errors. Keisha spent the next morning polishing her code, cleaning up variable names, and adding comments to explain each step. She wrote clear instructions in a README file so anyone could run her demo. She wanted to make it as easy as possible for Starlight's engineers to try it themselves. She created a short video recording of the server logs and a graph showing CPU usage before and after load balancing. She saved that file alongside her code. That afternoon, she opened her email and stared at the blank compose window. Hesitated. Would they read her message? They'd dismiss her as an outsider. She tapped her fingers on the keyboard and began typing. "Dear Mr. Davidson?" Then she paused. Mark Davidson's name felt too formal for a cold email, but she wanted to show respect. She continued, "I hope this message finds you well. My name is Keisha Morgan, interviewed for the Senior Systems Engineer position at Starlight Technologies. While I understand the role has been filled, I have been following reports of crashes in your video calling app when calls exceed 120 participants. As a passionate software engineer, I took the time to analyze public crash reports and build a prototype load balancing solution that prevents these crashes." She pressed enter twice and wrote a brief summary of her findings, using clear, simple language. She described how she collected crash data, identified the threshold, and designed an algorithm to spread video streams evenly across server clusters. She attached her slide deck with charts and her code repository link. Then she offered to demonstrate the solution live or answer any questions. She reviewed the email carefully, checking for typos and making sure it was polite and concise. She closed with, "Thank you for your time and consideration. I would be honored to support Starlight Technologies in resolving this critical issue. Please let me know if you would like to schedule a brief demo. Warm regards, Keisha Morgan." Keisha read it again, felt honest and to the point. She clicked send and watched the email disappear into her sent folder. Her heart thumped with a mixture of excitement and fear. She closed her laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in days, she allowed herself a moment of rest, but the rest was short. Every hour she checked her inbox. Some hours passed without anything new. She kept busy with her usual routine, a quick run in the park, dinner with a classmate, tweaking her personal website. Still, she could not shake the thought of her email. What if they never responded? What if her work went unseen? As the sun was setting on the third day, her phone buzzed. She grabbed it and saw a new message from an address she did not recognize. Her breath caught. She opened it. Ms. Morgan, thank you for your email and for sharing your prototype.
Our
Team has been struggling with this issue for weeks. We would like to schedule a call to discuss how your solution might integrate with our architecture. Are you available tomorrow at 10 a.m.? Keisha's hands trembled with joy. She took a deep breath and replied immediately, confirming her availability. She sent the email, her smile so broad that she could not help but laugh aloud. She had done it. She had turned rejection into opportunity. In the quiet of her apartment, she felt a thrilling sense of possibility. Soon, she would speak to the very team she had once hoped to join. Soon, her code would prove its value at Starlight Technologies. Keisha closed her eyes, filled with gratitude and determination. This was the moment she had worked toward, and it was just the beginning of a new chapter. Keisha woke early that morning, her mind alive with anticipation. Today was the day she would speak with Starlight's team. After weeks of hard work, she felt ready to take this next step. She brewed her coffee, the rich aroma filling her small kitchen, and reviewed her code one last time. She tested the live demo, making sure every line ran smoothly. When at last she saw the console logs display balanced loads without a single dropped stream, she allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Meanwhile, halfway across the country, Mark Davidson sat in first class on a long flight to San Francisco. He was headed to a major investor conference where Starlight Technologies would pitch its growth prospects and new product roadmap. Investors from all over would gather in a glass-walled hall overlooking the bay. Mark knew how much was riding on this presentation. The company had raised millions in venture capital, but still needed to prove it could scale its flagship video calling platform without crashing under heavy demand. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Fishing it out, he saw an email from an unfamiliar name, Keisha Morgan. He opened the message and quickly scanned her note. She had identified a crash threshold at about 120 participants, designed a load balancing algorithm, and even tested her prototype on simulated traffic. She included graphs, charts, and a link to her code repository. Mark sat back in his seat, eyes lighting up. He'd been hearing complaints text after text from his support team reporting server outages, angry tweets from customers.
all morning.
His mind had buzzed with worry. How would he reassure investors if the platform still had reliability issues? He tapped his phone and forwarded the email to Anil, his lead engineer. Take a look at this, he wrote. Can we test her solution? On our staging servers today, he hit send and leaned forward, gazing out the window at the clouds drifting below. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. When the plane touched down, Anil's response waited in Mark's inbox. I'm on it, deploying the prototype now. Mark smiled and tucked his phone away. He arranged his notes for the investor meeting, then boarded a shuttle to the conference center. Investors milled around coffee stations, engaged in animated conversation. Mark nodded politely as he passed, rehearsing his opening lines in his head. Back at the Starlight data center, Anil and his team prepared to test Keisha's code. They spun up a staging cluster matching the configuration of their production environment. The server nodes hummed to life, and logs began streaming across the engineer's screens. They deployed the load balancer service between the stream gateway and the cluster nodes, just as Keisha had instructed in her README file. Within minutes, they activated a traffic generator that simulated hundreds of video streams joining and leaving calls. As the simulation progressed, the engineers watched resource metrics, CPU usage, memory consumption, network throughput. Their amazement, the spikes disappeared. Instead of one node hammering at full capacity until it failed, each node shouldered a fair share of traffic. The system stayed stable even when the simulated user count crept toward 300. Stood and grinned at his team. This is exactly what we needed. He opened his laptop and pasted a quick note to Mark. Results look great. Crashes stopped. User complaints should drop dramatically. Rolling into production now. He tapped send and leaned back, watching the screens with satisfaction. Mark checked his phone just as he stepped onto the stage for his presentation. The audience greeted him with polite applause. A row of investors sat in the front, tablets and notebooks ready. Mark took a breath and clicked his remote to advance the slide deck. He began with the company's rapid growth, the number of active users rising each month, and then transitioned to the challenge, reliability under heavy concurrent usage. Before he could continue, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the screen and saw the message from Anil, fixed. Launching update now. Full report attached. Mark tapped into the attachment, a concise report with before and after. Charts showing error rates plummeting by 90%. He could feel the tension drain from his shoulders.
Out.
Without missing a beat, Mark raised his remote and clicked 2. The next slide. A simple statement in bold letters. We fixed it. A ripple of surprised laughter ran through the audience. Investors leaned forward, curiosity sparkling in their eyes. Mark smiled and said, "Our engineering team has just deployed a new load balancing algorithm. It can now support high participant video calls without interruption. Let me show you the data." He switched to the live dashboard projected on the big screen. The dashboard displayed real-time server health metrics, and a separate panel showed simulated calls running smoothly. The audience watched quietly as he explained how the system now assigned streams evenly across clusters. He described the phased rollout, starting with the staging environment he had tested earlier and moving to production within minutes of his announcement. An investor raised a hand. "That's impressive, but how confident are you that this solution will hold under real-world stress?" Mark nodded. "We've run thousands of tests in our staging environment. We also have monitoring alerts set up to detect any anomalies immediately. Our engineers can revert or adjust parameters in real time. We're confident this will hold as we scale to millions of users." After 10 minutes, Mark concluded, "This fix demonstrates not only our technical skill, but also our agility and commitment to reliability. We are ready for the next phase of growth." The audience burst into applause. Investors exchanged nods and whispered among themselves. Several raised their hands with follow-up questions. But all the queries centered on scaling and future features rather than reliability concerns. Backstage, Mark exhaled and checked his phone again. Another message from Anil read, "User support complaints down 90% since rollout. Great job, Keisha." Mark typed a quick reply. "Thank her for me. She'll hear from me soon." He pocketed his phone and stepped out to greet investors, confident and energized. That evening, after the conference wound down, Mark returned to his hotel room. He opened his laptop and drafted an email to Keisha. He wrote, "Dear Ms. Morgan, I want to thank you personally for your outstanding contribution. Your load balancing solution has already made a significant impact on our platform's stability and our investors' confidence. We have seen error rates drop by 90% and user complaints fall dramatically. Your work saved our presentation. Today, I would like to offer you a position as Senior Systems Engineer at Starlight Technologies. We are prepared to match your compensation requirements and would be thrilled to have you lead this project and mentor our team. Please let me know a convenient time to discuss the offer. Warm regards, Mark Davidson, CEO, Starlight Technologies." He paused before sending, reread the message to ensure it conveyed his appreciation, then clicked send. He leaned back and let a smile spread across his face. He had turned a crisis into an opportunity to showcase his company's resilience, and he had found an extraordinary engineer in the process. Thousands of miles away, Keisha's phone lit up with the arrival of Mark's email. She glanced at the subject line, "Offer from Starlight Technologies," and her heart pounded. She opened the message and read each word carefully. Tears welled in her eyes as she saw the words "offer" and "match your compensation requirements" and "lead this project." She felt a rush of triumph and validation. All her late nights, her painstaking data gathering, her bold email it had led to this moment. She sat back in her chair, hands trembling, and reread the email. Then she reached for her notebook and scribbled "accept offer" in bold letters. She closed her laptop and stood, pacing the length of her apartment, a grin lighting up her face. She envisioned her first day at Starlight, meeting the engineering team, walking through the data center, deploying her load balancing service in production. She thought of the users who would no longer face frustrating crashes, of remote workers and families keeping in touch without interruptions. That night, she finally allowed herself to celebrate. She called her parents and told them the news. Her mother's voice cracked with pride, and her father simply said, "We knew you could do it." She called Arya, who squealed with excitement, and begged for all the details. Keisha felt her heart swell with gratitude for everyone who supported her along the way. As the moon rose outside her window, Keisha sat at her desk, the offer letter open on her screen. She reflected on her journey, from small-town coder to sought-after engineer, from rejection to triumph. She thought about the mornings she woke. Before dawn, the nights she tested code until her eyes blurred, the moment she clicked send on that bold email. She realized that success often came not to the most experienced or the most connected, but to those who refused to give up, who saw problems as invitations, and who believed in their own potential. With a calm certainty, she clicked accept on her email reply. She typed a brief note. "Thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to working with the Starlight team to keep our platform strong for every user." Till she hit send and exhaled, a deep exhale that carried away months of anxiety and doubt. Keisha stood and walked to her window, looking out at the quiet street below. The city lights shimmered, and she felt that the world was full of possibilities. Tomorrow, she would begin a new chapter at Starlight Technologies. Keisha Morgan arrived at Starlight Technologies on her first official day, with a sense of calm excitement. The glass doors slid open, and she stepped into the bright lobby. Friendly faces greeted her as she walked past the reception desk. Balloons and a small welcome banner hung near the elevators. It felt like a celebration for everyone who chose her to be part of the team. She rode the elevator up to the engineering floor. When the doors opened, Mark Davidson was there waiting. He offered her a warm smile and extended his hand. "Welcome to Starlight, Keisha," he said. "We're thrilled to have you on board." She shook his hand and felt a rush of gratitude. He introduced her to Anil, the lead engineer, and the rest of the core team she had met over video calls. They guided her to her desk in the open workspace, where a laptop, a notebook, and a small welcome gift, a Starlight mug, sat waiting. After settling in, Keisha walked to the break room. She poured herself some coffee and joined a group of new co-workers. They asked friendly questions. "How was your commute? What did you think of the office? Do you like the mug?" Keisha laughed and told them she loved everything so far. She felt a glow of warmth as they welcomed her with genuine friendliness. Later that morning, Mark led Keisha into a glass-walled conference room. On the table lay a detailed rollout plan for the load balancing service she designed. Mark said, "This is your project now. Our goal is to deploy your code to production servers by the end of the week. I trust your judgment and the support of our operations team." Keisha nodded and felt a thrill of responsibility. She opened her notebook and wrote down the timeline: testing, staging validation, production deployment, and monitoring. She spent the next hours reviewing every line of code with Anil. They discussed logging formats, error handling, and performance metrics. Keisha suggested adding a health check endpoint so the system could automatically detect if any cluster node became overloaded. Anil agreed and praised her attention to detail. They paired on a few tasks, coding side by side at her workstation. Keisha felt right at home, her ideas listened to and respected. By lunchtime, Keisha and her new teammates ordered sandwiches from a nearby cafe. They sat around a large table near the windows, talking about weekend plans and favorite hobbies. One engineer mentioned he loved hiking. Another said he enjoyed painting. Keisha shared that she liked coding side projects and volunteering at the local community college. They smiled and said they looked forward to learning from her tutoring experience. It was not just a job, it felt like a place where everyone cared about each other. That afternoon, Keisha ran the first staging tests. Her load balancer handled simulated traffic smoothly. She watched as the graphs of CPU usage flattened out, and no errors appeared in the logs. She sent a quick message to the team chat, Staging tests are green, ready for production rollout. Engineers across time zones pinged back thumbs up. Emojis. Keisha allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. On the third day, Mark called a short meeting in the same conference room. Investors were scheduled to visit the office gallery, and he wanted technical success to show them. Keisha and her team set up a live demo station with monitors and charts. During the presentation, Mark walked the investors through the growth, numbers, and then shifted to reliability. Said, "Let me introduce you to the engineer who made this possible." Keisha stepped forward, her heart beating fast, but her voice steady. She explained the crash issue, the threshold pattern, and how the load balancer worked. She showed live metrics and answered the investors' questions with confidence. The investors nodded in approval and said, "This is exactly what we needed. Your team's agility gives us great confidence." Keisha's cheeks warmed, but she stayed focused, sharing a few best practices she planned to add next, like auto-scaling rules and predictive monitoring. The investors seemed genuinely impressed, and Mark gave her a grateful glance afterward. In that moment, Keisha felt proud that her work not only solved a technical crisis, but also inspired confidence in the company's future. The load balancing service rolled out to all production servers. The on-call engineer monitored the dashboards and reported back that crash incidents dropped by 95%. Customer support tickets related to calls crashing fell to almost zero. Keisha watched the positive feedback flood the internal support channels. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment. As the sun set on her first full week, Mark invited Keisha to join him and a few key leaders for dinner at a nearby restaurant. Over warm plates of food, they toasted her success. Mark raised his glass and said, "To Keisha, whose creativity and grit saved Starlight Technologies at a critical moment." "Thank you," everyone clinked glasses and smiled. Keisha felt both humble and honored as Mark continued, "We will keep working together to make our platform the best in the world."
Ow.
"I'm glad you're leading this charge."
Ah.
After dinner, Keisha walked home under a sky full of stars. She thought back to the small apartment where her journey began, coding alone late into the night. She remembered the sting of rejection and the determination that followed. She realized how each step, learning, experimenting, reaching out, built toward this moment. She felt gratitude for every challenge because each one taught her something new. Over the next months, Keisha guided the engineering team in refining the load balancing service. She wrote documentation so clear that new hires understood it instantly. She mentored junior engineers and held brown bag sessions to teach them how to analyze crash patterns. She partnered with the product team to design new features that could benefit from load balancing logic, like dynamic video quality adjustments. Under her guidance, Starlight Technologies became known for both innovation and rock-solid reliability. Outside of work, Keisha continued tutoring at the community college. She found joy in helping students learn to code. She told them about her own path, how she faced rejection, built a prototype, and earned her dream job. Her story filled them with hope. She showed them how technical skills and perseverance go hand in hand. On the anniversary of her first interview rejection, Keisha posted a short reflection on her personal blog. She wrote about the power of persistence, the importance of solving real problems, and the value of believing in yourself. Her post gained attention and many comments from other engineers sharing similar journeys. She replied to each comment with encouragement. A few months later, Starlight published a case study in a major tech magazine highlighting their reliability improvements. Keisha was quoted, "We solved our biggest challenge by focusing on user data, building a clear prototype, and collaborating across teams. It was not just about code IT, it was about caring for people who rely on our service." The article ended with a photo of Keisha standing in front of a server rack, smiling confidently. As the years passed, Keisha continued to grow at Starlight. She became head of performance engineering, leading new initiatives to optimize infrastructure, reduce latency, and support global expansion. She remained humble, remembering her first days with the load balancing project. She stayed curious, always learning new technologies. She stayed kind, mentoring others, and listening with respect. One sunny afternoon, Keisha walked through the Starlight headquarters and saw a young engineer at her desk. The engineer looked frustrated at a crashing test environment. Keisha paused, smiled, and said, "Let me help." Questions, and guided the engineer through analyzing logs and finding a solution. In that moment, she passed on the same spirit of support she had received. Keisha's path from rejection to leadership became part of the Starlight culture. New employees heard her story during orientation. They learned that innovation often comes from unexpected places, and that anyone with a thoughtful idea could make a difference. The company thrived on this openness. Years later, on another occasion when investors gathered, Mark introduced Keisha as his co-presenter. He said, "I want to share the stage with the person who taught us that no challenge is too big when we focus on our users and work together." The audience broke into applause. Keisha spoke about future goals and rising challenges in video technology. Her voice was calm, clear, and confident. Looking out at the audience, Keisha felt grateful. For every twist in her journey, she had turned a no into a triumph and shown that genuine care and creativity could overcome any obstacle.
Ow.
She thought of the grandmother whose video call no longer froze, of the small startup that could finally rely on the platform of the investors who believed in the company's future. Those real people fueled her passion. At the end of her presentation, she closed with a simple message. Success starts when we see every problem as a chance to learn, help others, and grow together. The room erupted in applause. Keisha smiled broadly. She knew her story would continue, but this chapter, from rejection to leadership, was one she would always remember with pride.